There's only a few JRPGs I'd consider a masterpiece, where they're nearly perfect and I can't think of anything that I'd want to change. Of course, this is just my personal list, but it includes games like Persona 5, Dragon Quest XI, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy 6 and 7, and Phantasy Star IV. For me, Phantasy Star IV wasn't just the best game on the Sega Genesis, but one of the best JRPGs of all time with its fantastic fusion of storytelling, 16-bit art, and gameplay. It came out in 1993, which is almost 3 years after Phantasy Star III. The game was directed by Rieko Kodama, who was one of the key members in the first two games, and Toru Yoshida. In an interview that was translated at shmuplations and which I'll link in the notes, Kodama states, "We the developers started the project on our own initiative, and many people on the team had worked on PS2, and were able to address the shortcomings and unfinished ideas they had from the game in PS4. Yoshida also mentioned, one primary goal for the development was to bring a conclusion to the saga and put everything in order. So essentially, it was a passion project, which fortunately Sega approved. And it shows in every aspect of the game. Kodama mentioned that the game transitioned from 16 megs to 24 megs, which helped with the increased space. And while she was team leader, she continued to work on the graphics while coordinating with all the other members. I interviewed Phantasy Star IV's composer, Ippo, and I'll get more into that interview when I talk about the music, but I did ask her about Kodama as a director, and Ippo told me, Kodama-san seldom instructed us on what specifically to do. I had the impression that she trusted the team and had confidence in their decisions. Of course, when someone had difficulty with their work, she would thoughtfully guide that developer. I think that was her way of protecting the team. I've expressed my admiration for the series countless times, especially Phantasy Star II for its brilliant depictions of a utopia and its fall. Phantasy Star IV is a story about what happened to the fallen utopia a millennium later. And warning, there are a bunch of story spoilers. Time and legacy are an integral part of the tapestry that weaves together into Phantasy Star IV. The decisions people made in Phantasy Star 1 and 2 have a huge impact on the future. This has an even more sinister meaning for those who finish Phantasy Star 2 and learn the sad truth. Terrans were responsible for the mother brain that brought ruin to the Algo system. At the same time, the technological marvels they established have continued functioning, shepherded by a number of androids. But the evil entity called Dark Force has corrupted the planetary systems that had once made the planet a teeming paradise, and the religious leader Zio is channeling that dark power to bring ruin to Motavia. It's against this backdrop that you start off as Chaz, a young bounty hunter being guided by the more experienced hunter, Alice Brangwyn. Her first name is the same as Phantasy Star 1's heroine, though in Japanese it's actually Lyra. I love how both of them comment on various bits of NPC's dialogue, and give you a strong sense of their personality. These aren't just the typical stoic or quiet protagonists, they have opinions on things and aren't shy about expressing them. I've always loved Phantasy Star's unique fusion of fantasy and science fiction that gives the series so much of its identity. The characters wield swords and guns to battle, fight giant sandworms, and ride hydrofoils across the ocean. A mystery propels them. Why are so many biomonsters being created? Finding the answer takes Alice and Chaz across a variety of towns, meeting a diverse group of characters from the enigmatic and cocky Ruin, to the revenge-driven Grizz, and the curious academic Han who wants to get to the bottom of the crisis. I really like how the journey gives us a sense of who each of your party members are. Like with Han, he's embarrassed to visit his hometown, but you see his conflicts with his dad, meet his fiancée, and get a better sense of what motivates him. Or when Rune uses magic for the first time, it hints at his true identity. Initially, Rune and Chaz don't seem to like each other, and it kind of reminded me of Han Solo and a young Luke. Likewise, their arc goes from hostility to begrudging respect and genuine friendship by the end. With Grizz, you learn from his sister how Zio killed their family and he wasn't strong enough to beat the evil magician. These character moments flesh out their personalities and make them feel like living characters. In Birth Valley, you discover the bioplant is malfunctioning, which in part explains the monster problem. This plot thread is a nod to Phantasy Star 2 and the climax of the middle act, which ends in the death of your companion, Nei. Inside the bioplant in PS4, we meet Rika, who was created by the AI that controls the bioplant and is the product of 1,000 years of improvement on genetic information from a prototype prior to the Great Collapse. Rika is essentially Nei's descendant and becomes a key member of the party. For me, it was a connection to a party member I had cared about from Phantasy Star II, and I felt a deep sense of legacy. Rika is one of the most memorable characters in Phantasy Star IV, and the one scene that stays with me is the first time she emerges from the bioplant and sees the blue skies. She's in awe, delighted by the expanse as well as the vibrant color of the flowers. The music that plays conveys her sense of childish curiosity perfectly. Manga panels give a more cinematic feel to the cutscene, each visual square stacking on top of the other to provide juxtaposition or emphasize a specific mood. This helps highlight the mentor-pupil relationship of Alice, who is teaching the younger Chaz. Chaz was from a distant country with a dark past, but Alice gave him a chance at a new life. Their witty bantering and their genial familiarity is a big part of what makes the first leg of the adventure so much fun. But events take a dark turn with the entrance of the Black Magician Zio. Zio isn't just launching a physical attack on the Motavians, even though he's destroyed towns like Molcom. He wants to enslave them spiritually, creating a church full of fanatic followers. One of his acolytes is screaming on the ground in a religious frenzy, and another of the clergy members faints in awe at the mention of Zio. There's even a side mission in the form of a bounty where you have to save a Piatan student from the cult. Evil needs oxygen to thrive, and his fanatical followers provide plenty of it. Consumed by his personal failure as a magician and a twisted hatred of existence, Zio welcomes his god, Dark Force, as it's giving him his power to destroy the world. When your party finally does fight him, Zio barely moves, just using his arms in contempt to cast spells. He is impervious to attacks, Dark Force's face hovering behind him. It's almost as though he's taunting the entire party until he gets tired and launches a Black Wave spell that is about to consume Chaz. Alice jumps in his place, taking the blast. The party, seeing their attack as hopeless, retreats. There's a genuine sense of helplessness, especially as your leader Alice is badly injured. Without her to guide the party, I felt lost, unsure what to do. Alice directs them to find Rune and the Psycho Wand, which can nullify Zio's magic barrier. As events become more desperate and hopeless, Chaz learns to rely on his friends as they fight through their voyage together. I know I gave a spoiler warning already, but the next part is really big, so just wanted to give another warning. I got the Psycho Wand and assumed we go back to save Alice, but Rune and Rika get an ominous feeling. The party returns and find Alice's condition has worsened. The attack from Zio was too strong. The hand of Dark Force is beyond even Rune's ability to cure. Alice, usually so strong and confident, passes away. I couldn't believe it. Just like I'd been shocked in Phantasy Star II with Nei's death, Alice's death devastated me. Hands down, this was the most emotional death in 16-bit era gaming. No other game comes close. Distraught, feeling totally lost, the party faces Zio again, and this time it's personal. The Psycho Wand nullifies his barrier. After that, the battle is a lot easier. He puts up a fight but is no match for the team. Grizz gets in the final blow and we beat Zio, bringing his reign to an end. He shouts in outrage that he's been defeated, indifferent to the pain he's caused. But it's also clear there's another stronger enemy behind him, Dark Force. But despite having avenged Alice, the rest of the game doesn't feel the same without her. There's a strong sense of cycles throughout the game with recurring motifs and themes, like the air castle from Phantasy Star I that's still around, floating in space among the debris of the destroyed planet Parma. You find Lashiek at the end, who is one of the main villains of the first Phantasy Star. He's been reincarnated and has waited 2,000 years for revenge. It's an eerie reminder that the past never dies. I also appreciated visiting a town full of the descendants of Phantasy Star II's space pirate, Tyler, the guy who rescued Rolf from the satellite of Gyra, and that I'd completely forgotten about. Finding apartment town in Desolis was a cool reminder of those past events. There's even an awesome nod to the black sheep of the 4, Phantasy Star IV, with the remains of one of the massive spaceship worlds lying in ruins for you to explore. I know it's often mentioned how 3 was made by a different crew, but I still felt 4's leadership at least knew what was going on with the game, which is why there's many references to it throughout. The developers also wanted to clearly connect several of the main characters to protagonists from the past games. Co-director Yoshida mentioned that Chaz was a descendant of Alice, Rika was a direct remake of Ney, Rune is the latest iteration of Noah, while Ren was interestingly a nod to General Siren rather than the Ren from Phantasy Star III. The development team did a great job refining the game mechanics for Phantasy Star IV. The difficulty curve is much more balanced in the 4th game, so that even though there is still a bit of grinding to do, it's nothing as soul-crushing as 2 and 3. The battles are much more dynamic since this is the first time in the series that the players, enemies, and background all appear at the same time. The music is catchy, the flow of battle is quick, and macros allow the automation of battles, which was very convenient. The development team opted not to include an auto battle for 4 unlike previous games because the programmer felt it disconnected the players from the fights. I hate that so many RPGs give you a huge cast of characters, then only let you take 3 of them into battle. Thankfully, Phantasy Star IV lets you bring 5 members into fights, which not only is more fun, but gives you a sense of each character and who they are and the way they fight. Chaz, wielding a heavy sword, uses both hands to strike. His skills revolve around sword combat like an air slash and crosscut. Rika, with 2 claws, cuts enemies apart and can even double slash with her techniques. As Chaz represents the player and Rika is a Newman, they grow the most in combat throughout the game, starting weak but becoming badasses by the end. Ren uses a gun to attack and has skills like Barrier, but follows the principle established in Phantasy Star III that androids can't use any magic. He's basically a tank and, like his character, remains evenly stalwart throughout. Rune uses a staff to strike, but the attack is weak since his real specialty is magic. He has access to more damage spells than any other character. With his overall experience, he starts off as the strongest character, but others reach parity with him as the game goes on, showing how strong they've become. Also in line with how characters like Rune and Chaz bond, certain characters can combine techniques resulting in even stronger spells, like this firestorm evoked by Chaz and Rune. There is so much nuance and complexity to the battles and the individual abilities of the characters, I honestly could make a video just about that. It's that great. One thing though that I still struggle with, despite having played the series for so long, is making sense of the spell names. I still have a hard time recognizing what's what, especially when I'm coming back after not having played in a while. Yoshida mentioned how the team really wanted to include vehicle battles since it was something they'd wanted to do since Phantasy Star II. Kodama added, "I really just wanted to make moving around the map more fun. It's super convenient for people who want to get to the next place. The controls are simple and your HP resets after every battle, but you can blast enemies with a cannon and fire napalm for multiple foes. Enemies also change up depending on location, like these giant leviathans when you use the hydrofoil over the ocean. I do kinda miss Ren's transformation from part 3, but the vehicles in this game were a nice way of mixing things up. You'll need them too when you finally return to the planet of Desoris. While you try to visit some satellites that are causing instability on Motavia, you get attacked on board the ship. Your party is forced to crash land on Desoris. If you inspect the wreckage, Rune blames you for the crash, and Chaz, who normally argues with him about everything, accepts it without complaint because he knows it's true. Unfortunately, you've destroyed a Desorian temple. One of their priests, Raja, is surprisingly chill about that fact and even joins you. He's a quirky character that often jokes with your party. I like how you get to know a lot more about Desorian culture in the game, and it's fun seeing them relaxing at a bar or raise giant penguins, one of which will follow you around for a price. From here, the journey gets more and more complex. Every time you think you found the culprit behind the evils racking the system, you discover there's more going on. You're only dealing with the manifestations of evil, not the root problem. Like this one character named Seth that you meet. At first he seems a little disoriented, and then expresses his admiration for you. His dialogue is awkward, almost like he's trying to figure out what it means to be human. And then you suddenly discover he's the humanized form of Dark Force. The strangeness of the interaction made me wonder if Dark Force was evolving, trying to understand humanity better. This isn't another Zeo planting seeds of destruction. Seth, depending on your interpretation of his actions, is just a random dude, showing how evil can come in many forms, even the banal. It would have been easy for the dev team to have ended things after Zio, or Lashik, or even the first incarnation of Dark Force you face. But every time you think you've reached the end, you realize there's another form of Dark Force to tackle, causing calamities, like a plague that racks everyone on Dezoris, including Raja. This is almost like a Phantasy Star 5, 6, 7, and 8 jammed into one big game, and your task is to get to the real source of the problem in the Algo star system so that it doesn't repeat 1,000 years later. Phantasy Star IV was an expensive game for its time, retailing for $99, which even now seems a lot, but with inflation is worth $195. If you saw my super highlight review, you'll know I had about a $30 budget every 6 months to a year for a game. Phantasy Star IV was way beyond anything I could afford, but I saw it one day at a rental store called Blockbuster and got super excited. It was summer break and I rented Phantasy Star IV for around $5 I think, and I had 5 days to beat the game. I have very fond memories of that week racing to beat the RPG, which I somehow did. Easily the best $5 I spent that year. To that end, the party eventually discovers an all-new planet and learns the true origins behind the planets of the star system. An ancient battle between the profound darkness and the great light was at the root of it all. Unfortunately, the destruction of Parma in Phantasy Star II upset the precarious balance established long before they were born. The people living on the planet are suffering for a fight they had no part in. In games, it's relatively easy to do the right thing. In real life, it's hard and scary. So I love the fact that Chaz has serious moments of doubt throughout the game. Like when Alice passes away, he's devastated, unsure of what to do. It takes a somber exchange with both Rika and Ruin to help him muster motivation to continue. But it's obviously haunting him as he has to face her again later in a test to prove that his hatred won't consume him and cause him to misuse one of the game's deadliest spells, Megan. Later on, when Chaz learns that the fate of the entire Algo star system relies on them, he is overwhelmed by the pressure and upset at the unwanted burden, lashing out in understandable, if selfish, defiance. It's at this point Chaz is taken underneath the Esper mansion of the hero of Phantasy Star 1 and 2, Lutz. Chaz is granted the legendary sword, the Elcidion, and then sees a vision of all the heroes of Phantasy Star 1 and 2. It was incredible seeing Rolf, Ney, Odin, Meow, and Rudo again. The memory of all the hours I'd spent grinding to level up these characters flooding back to me. The eternal fight against Dark Force had taken many permutations, both in the Algo star system and for me in the outside world playing through each iteration of the Phantasy Star series. I've played through 2 and 4 multiple times, and I remembered where I was each time I started anew and how different my life was. Seeing Chaz's vision of the past made me think of all those years in between each game, the choices I'd made in my life, the friendships, the bonds, and even the conflicts. I've been playing the Phantasy Star series as long as I could remember playing games. Although it's not millennium separating each playthrough, but rather decades, the sense of RPG legacy stirred me. A big part of this is the incredible soundtrack by Ippo. I spoke with her in an interview for Kotaku and followed up with a few questions for this video. Phantasy Star III was the first game she wrote original music for, and she only had a month to compose it, which blows my mind because it's so good. For 4, she fortunately had more time, but she also made a special request to her boss. In other projects at Sega, composers sat in a separate area. She asked to be in the same room with the dev team, which proved to be crucial. I could ask any programmer to show me any scene, a graphic designer to show me any effect, chat with staff, and have lunch together. The chance to have bonding moments like chatting with the staff and having snacks with them may seem irrelevant in the job, but is very important in developing games. Working together in the same room made it so much easier for me to compose or make sound effects. She composed many of the tracks for the cutscenes in Phantasy Star IV before she saw the graphics because they weren't completed until almost the end of the project. But she had seen the hand-drawn storyboards and had a general idea of what kind of scenes they were and what the actual dialogue was. I looked at the storyboards over and over again, imagined the scenes, and composed. Unlike battle sequences and walking on the overworld, the script is important in drama sequences, so I composed trying not to make my scores too dramatic. Only with the ending sequence did I wait for the graphics to be completed before I composed. This is because I had to adjust the timing of the graphics and the score to be in unison with each other. When the graphics were completed, I measured the timing of every scene and wrote them on paper. I wrote down the dialogue and explanations of each scene. I started the work by making a long timesheet. I thought it would be very hard to compose scores for that long ending sequence with perfect timing. To my pleasant surprise, I had little trouble. I knew the players of Phantasy Star IV must have spent a long time to reach the ending, so I composed the score to be peaceful and happy. Though saying goodbye to the characters within the game must be sad, I wanted the players to have bright feelings as the saga came to an end. Phantasy Star IV also had one of what she considered her best decisions when it came to the usage of a score. After the final cutscene and the credits start to play, she used the same score as the opening cutscene, though with slight adjustments to the tempo and speed. She was originally supposed to compose a totally new score for the end, but when the programmer showed her the ending and the staff roll, she strongly felt it must be very cool to end this game using the same score again. When I asked her for the video which song she'd like to highlight, she told me it's hard to choose just one, but the title track is the most memorable for her. And I agree because it's so great. I love that the music starts right when you boot it up with the Sega logo still there. That high level of passion and detail shows throughout the entire journey. I love the fact that you could talk among your own party, not just to get updates on what's been going on, but also to hear their banter. I briefly mentioned this earlier, but as a bounty hunter, there's actually a bunch of side quests you can undertake. This one involving a kid seems like a silly one at first. Even though he's physically okay, he thinks he's dying. Chaz has to buy a toy Alice sword and do a sword dance to encourage and inspire him. But later on, when Chaz also has serious doubts about himself, it's the Alcidian sword that inspires him, making for a nice parallel. Another of my favorite bounties is the Silver Soldier. After Mother Brain was defeated in PS2, it turns out some scientists tried to revive the program, creating a daughter to take her place. It was a prototype designed to take care of the Algo system, but was abandoned in favor of the satellite at Zelun. Daughter isn't aware of this and tries to take over again. And if you think about it, Mother Brain brought a utopia to her people. It was Ney first who generated all those biomonsters and your own actions that precipitated a crisis. What would a Mother Brain without the influence of Dark Force be like? You don't find out here as Ren shuts her down and lets her know that humanity can stand on its own feet, but I love this bookend to Mother Brain's fate. It's amazing that the designers put so much thought into these optional quests. In addition, NPC dialogue often updates after key events. I followed up with that Zeo fanatic after defeating Zeo and they're still just as devoted. But there is one who regrets his actions and is in disbelief at what he did. Also, one of the final members you recruit, Kyra, is an Esper from the Esper Mansion in Phantasy Star II, which again is a super cool connection to the past. You find her struggling with a bunch of killer trees and help break her free, after which she joins your group. Kyra's presence ties in with the big reveal that Rune is actually the 5th generation of Lutz. I really like how this connection goes all the way back to the first game. Phantasy Star IV shows what happens when passion and ambition go hand in hand with a good budget and a reasonable schedule. Though in the interviews, they mentioned how things came down to the wire because of the large scope. As some of you may know, the game's co-director, Rieko Kodama, passed away in 2022. I love the games she's helped create, from the Phantasy Star series, to Skies of Arcadia, the 7th Dragon series, and more. I was just a kid when I first heard about Phantasy Star II, and it had a huge influence on my life. I wrote a couple of books a few years back, and I was blown away when my Japanese publisher sent the Japanese editions to Kodama, and she actually took the time not only to read them, but to tweet about them. It was incredible to experience directly what a supportive and incredible person she was. I was honored to interact with her a few times online. When I heard the news that she passed away, it really hit me hard. I wrote a tribute to her in IGN Japan as I had so much to say. She was a pioneer and visionary who changed the gaming landscape. In the early days of her career, she was credited as Phoenix Rie. Of course, phoenixes are known for their ability to be reborn, and in the same way, I feel her work will continue on, inspiring many, as her legacy will be more alive than ever. I don't know how many more times I'll get to play the Phantasy Star games, but I love each trek through them, inspired by all that the incredible team did. This is also my second time doing a review of the game, and I incorporated parts of the earlier review here too. If you haven't played Phantasy Star IV, I highly recommend it. It's not just the cool science fiction and superb art that attracts me to the series. It's a timeless story about courage under desperate odds and friendships that get tested, then forge into something stronger as the warriors fight against the profound darkness that makes me wish Phantasy Star IV hadn't been the end of the millennium, but rather a new beginning.